I'm a little bit, I don't know if concerned is the right word. I'm a little bit intrigued in maybe a negative way about how they write the senior officers on this show. And I don't know if that's the best way to go about it. So you can take either of those points or you can go with whatever direction you want.
Well, what I liked about the way that they wrote the senior officers, specifically the captain in this episode, is I like that they wrote her as not over the top, but she is as much of the show as any of the other characters are. Like, she is sort of like a send up of a hard ass captain who is not perfect herself. I think like everybody in this episode comes off as not being perfect, which is nice. I think so far this is the most we've seen of the captain, and I didn't hate what they did with her. I thought she was fine. I think the thing that I'm really noticing is in the show is like you're gonna have to throw out your quote unquote classic idea of how people act in a Star Trek show, which I mean we already saw up to this point, but it seems like there's not really anybody who's sort of the grounding character
fits the canon
from
description.
previous,
yeah.
Which
is my point about what I thought. That's what I'm concerned about the senior staff. Really, like I thought the conception of this, and I think that I shared a link on the Discord about the pop culture podcast Happy Hour, the NPR show, did an episode about Lower Decks, and one of them just brought up that, and I agree with it, that the conception of the show is almost like when you read the log line about it, that the ship exists in Starfleet, but the focus is on these lower deck characters who are kind of the misfits of this whole thing. And so the way that they're playing it, and it's probably because you have to feature the senior staff enough where they can't all be straight-laced, like they have to have some kind of comedy angle to them. But the senior staff on this show are also not really quintessential Star Trek in a way that I thought they were going to do that, which is the senior staff are very limited in their appearance. But when they come on, they are the sort of like noble, almost like I think Ransom is actually the best character that way. He's kind of a like stereotypical like number one officer who's going to do the good thing. And he's only slightly funny and exaggerated in that way. But I think the captain and like the tactical guy, the security officer, are not, and the doctor's not that way either. But Ransom, I think, is my favorite of the senior staff because he's kind of just a slightly exaggerated version of what the traditional Star Trek officer is supposed to be in that position anyway.
Yeah, they've drawn out the ridiculousness of the way that those characters are characterized in other shows, and they've dialed it up just as much as everybody else. But yeah, he is probably the closest to the traditional kind of Star Trek commanding character. And honestly, I don't know if it's a bad thing that they're doing it that way, because I mean I think it's just a matter of approach. Because I originally thought the same thing you did, that it was going to be more like, oh, it's going to be the wacky hijinks that goes on behind the scenes of the traditional episode. Star Trek. Yeah. And they're sort of positioning it as though the entire ship is an outcast, which is not a problem. It's just, it wasn't exactly what I was thinking of. But I don't think that preconception aside, I don't think that the way they're doing it is necessarily a problem, because I think the way that they handle their characters so far has been pretty good. Yeah. And everybody has a little bit of silliness baked into them that can come out in different situations and whatnot. Is
it a problem if I don't think they've run into another Starfleet ship yet.
That's interesting, because the only other Starfleet people they've come in contact with are
admirals, I think.
The admiral, the admiral from the first episode, who even he had a little bit of silliness to him, and the admiral from this episode, who I don't think had any silliness to her.
No.
I'm not expecting there to be a much of a difference if and when they do run into another ship. Like I based on the way that this show feels like, I feel like there's an episode coming where they get into some sort of competition with another Starfleet ship.
Ransom's going to run into his college buddy, who they are constantly competing with each other. Yeah,
and everybody on the other ship is going to be like college jock characters, something like that. Which, fine. That's fine.
That's fine. Yeah, it's I don't care. I guess this is just a continuing thread about whether or not none of this matters. It's just that we have to obviously talk about something.
Sure.
But like
Sure.
Is it more in the vein of Star Trek canon if the ship is just kind of if these characters are the strange ones? I think I think maybe that's what's kind of missing, is that if this was a Star Trek show and the backdrop was all traditional Star Trek, that you had like no question that that's what it was, it wouldn't be a very rewarding role to be Ransom or the captain in that position, but hopefully it would just be a day player who you pay a couple bucks to record their 10 minutes of lines across an entire season. But you focus on the misfit characters, and at least at that point, it feels like it's a cohesive part of the larger Star Trek universe. And especially if they're going to insist that this is a canonical show, I'm fine with that comedy as long as it shows me that the real Star Trek universe still exists out there somewhere. But I think that the way they're doing it now is probably guaranteed to be funnier, but it's not canonical any longer. And I don't care. Again, I don't care about the canon argument. This is just like, where do you position the show if you're creating and writing for this show?